If you've ever bought a house, sold a condo, or even just rented an apartment, you've probably bumped into a world with some really, really strict rules. On the surface, it all seems pretty straightforward, right? But underneath, there's this complex legal web that dictates who can actually help you, and, more importantly, who's allowed to get paid for it. Seriously, think about it for a second. Your friendly resident manager can totally walk you through the apartment, talk about the lease, show you the pool, but the second you say, I'd like to buy this entire building, a completely different set of people has to get involved. And that's not just some company policy, that's the law. So today, we're going to break down exactly what those rules are and why they draw that line in the sand. So here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the one big rule that everything else is built on. Then we'll get into the key exceptions, all those what about this person scenarios. After that, we are literally going to follow the money to see how compensation is supposed to work. And finally, we'll look at the pretty serious costs of breaking these rules. Okay, let's start with the big one. This is the foundational principle that really governs every single real estate transaction. Think of it as the bedrock for all the other rules we're about to get into. The core idea here is actually pretty simple. If you're getting paid to do what's called a real estate act, selling property, negotiating a deal, drumming up business, you absolutely must have a license. A broker just can't legally pay someone without a license for doing that kind of work. It's a clear line meant to protect all of us and keep things professional. But as you can probably guess, that's not quite the whole story. Right, because a single one-size-fits-all rule just doesn't work for the complexity of the real world. So the law carves out some very specific and pretty logical exceptions to this whole licensing thing. Now, these aren't loopholes. They are very deliberate exemptions for people whose jobs might involve a little bit of real estate activity, but they aren't acting as full-blown agents. Let's break them down into three main groups to make it easy. And this first group takes us right back to our opening question. It's all about property management. We're talking resident managers of apartment buildings, the people who work for them, and even agents handling those short-term vacation rentals. The law basically recognizes that their role is more about management or hospitality, not the same kind of high-stakes transaction as selling the entire building. Our second group of exemptions? Well, that covers the corporate and financial world. Think about employees at a bank or officers of a corporation who are dealing with property the company owns. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. They can't get any special compensation for it. It just has to be part of their regular job. No bonus for selling the old office building. And our final group covers people who are acting under a different type of legal power. This is your attorney who's providing legal advice, or someone who has power of attorney from the owner, or a trustee who's been appointed by a court. In these situations, their authority to act comes from a separate legal duty, not from a real estate license. Okay, so we know who can act, but now for the really juicy part, how do they get paid? The rules around money are just as strict and just as structured as the rules about who can do the work. You see, the flow of money isn't a straight line from a client to an agent. No. The client pays the brokerage, the company. Then the brokerage pays its licensed agent. An agent can never, ever just take a commission check directly from a client. And they can't pay another agent directly either. Everything has to flow through that supervising broker. It creates a really clear chain of command and responsibility. This quote right here gets to the heart of it all. The law isn't against paying people for work. It's against paying unlicensed people for doing work that requires a license. So you can totally pay someone for things like marketing, taking photos, or administrative tasks, but you absolutely cannot pay them for referring a client who ends up buying a house. That's what's called a finder's fee, and it's a huge no-no. So let's see how this works in the real world. An illegal finder's fee is giving your buddy some cash for sending a home buyer your way. A legal rebate, on the other hand, is when a broker decides to give a piece of their own commission back to the actual buyer or seller in the deal. It's seen as just adjusting the total commission, and it's perfectly fine as long as everybody involved knows about it. So we've laid out the rules, we've followed the money, but what happens if somebody just decides to ignore all this? Well, the consequences are serious, both for the pros and for regular folks. For licensed professionals, we're talking about their entire career being on the line. If a broker gets caught employing or paying an unlicensed person to do licensed activities, the real estate commission can come in and suspend their license or even take it away for good. And the penalties go beyond just the licensed agents. Anyone, an escrow officer, a seller, anyone who knowingly pays an unlicensed person for licensed work is committing a misdemeanor. Now, you might look at that $100 fine and think, That's it. But each illegal payment is a separate offense, and it creates a paper trail of illegal activity. But things get way, way more serious if you're the one caught pretending to be an agent without a license. This is not a small mistake. It's a major offense. For an individual, that fine can shoot up to $10,000 and could even come with jail time. And for a corporation, the stakes are even higher. If a company sets up shop and acts as a real estate brokerage without a license, it can be hit with a fine of up to $50,000. The law comes down hard on this because a company can do a lot more damage to a lot more people. The message is crystal clear. This isn't a business you can just jump into. So, at the end of the day, all of these detailed rules about who needs a license, who's exempt, how the money flows, they all boil down to one main thing: protecting the public. They exist to make sure that when you're making one of the biggest financial decisions of your life, the person you're dealing with is qualified, they're accountable, and they're playing by the rules. And that really is the big question to leave you with, isn't it? These laws have given the industry structure for decades. But with technology and new business models changing things so fast, you have to wonder, are these the right rules for the future of real estate? Or will they need to change too?